What is up, everybody? We are back with another episode of TripleKO, but this time it's not just 3, it's 4 of us. We have a special guest, Miss DaPurpleSharpie, aka Hollywood commentator herself for Skullgirls or Evo 2022, and we're also joined by Maximilian and Matt. But first of all, how are you doing, Sharpie? How are you doing?
I am good. Not only am I literally going to be the very first person to ever commentate, one of the very first people to ever commentate Skullgirls at EVO as a main game, I'll also be one of the very first people to ever commentate multiverses at EVO this year, and I'm incredibly excited about that opportunity. Yeah, it's a big deal.
I'll be ready for the multi-game EVO commentary. It's going to be super fun and not stressful at all.
Running around to different stages.
I have no free time at EVO. Like, I am sleeping 5-minute intervals in between my sets, and it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait.
Yeah. I think it's going to be pretty exciting. But besides EVO, we are here to talk about a very strong thing just in fighting games, indie fighting games. I feel like there's so many indie fighting games. Obviously, we have our Capcoms, SNKs, and Namcos, but lots of really cool games are made in indie. And I would say 2 games that were at EVO that were indie fighting game related were like Fightin Herds and obviously Skullgirls. But besides those 2 famous ones, there are like literally tons and tons. And our best friend over here, Matt, made this long list of indie fighting games that we probably never heard of. Maybe some of us have heard of, but these are kind of really just crazy ones, right? There's also stories about where they're from, one-man army making like specific games and everything like that. Matt, how did you find this list?
This list is by no means complete. I'd really suggest everyone to follow indie fighting games on Twitter. They post like animated GIFs. This is how you find a lot of fighting games, indie ones specifically, and pictures and trailers. So that's where I found a lot of these, but it is by no means complete. But the first one is not from them. Justin, what is the name of this first game on our list? Because the real fucking OGs know about this game.
Well, before I was gonna ask a question before we get into like the direct list itself. Like the date that I'm seeing on this one is potentially 2011 if we're looking at the right game. And that was the first question I had was, what was the dawn of like indie fighting games? What are like the earliest indie fighting games you can actually think of besides them becoming real big products, like when indie started becoming a thing around the early 2010s?
You know, Matt, Max, I feel like you commentated, you're part of one of those early indie fighting games from NYU called what, Yatagarasu?
But even that was like mid to 2010s. Like it was not,
really?
It feels like it was a decade ago, like several decades ago, but it was like around like 2012 to 2013.
It was a 3DS and Vita game. So yeah, it was kind of around there. I don't know. That's a really good question because you could date like our unlicensed fighting games. Is Street Fighter 7 on the NES? is that an indie?
The first true indie.
Is that? So it's like, I don't know. I think with the rise of digital like marketplaces, that's kind of where you sort of maybe could draw a line, like anything released on these services or Steam or any digital platforms, because that made indies a viable thing. And anything before that is kind of erring on the side of fan games or like legal ramifications of Capcom saying, no, I don't think so.
At least on my end, because I obviously like didn't keep super tied into like the Mugen and or anything like that, which could be considered indie in some way, I guess.
Yeah.
But to me, like Skullgirls was the first one, like the earliest one, because it was in development for so long. Like the early versions of the game are the ones that I played at like E3, I think either 2011 or 2012. And seeing how far it's come and it's still going to this day is truly crazy. It's funny, like if I think of indie fighting games, I think of Skullgirls, and it's still one of the ones that's being supported.
Yeah. Definitely.
So we'll get into that a little bit later, though.
Yeah, no, that'll be the main event for Sharpie to definitely tag in a little bit.
Yeah, because I have some fun stories for like Skull, like literally like maybe day minus 500 with Skullgirls at James Chen's house. So it's
in
some
his
interesting
bathroom.
Stuff. Literally, it's some interesting stuff. But yeah, what is Battle High 2? You said it's OG, and I feel like I'm pretty OG, but this is the first time I've seen this game.
So back in the day on the Xbox 360 marketplace, I would just troll for like new digital games because I was always really interested. Like and I'd always want like action, beat 'em ups, or fighters, and those were like the 3 games you'd find like almost the least, because it was a lot of puzzle games, a lot of blah blah blah. And I just saw Battle High, and then I had a picture of like a cool like anime protagonist, I believe, and it was, I think, originally for the PC, and then it kind of spun its wheels in development on the PC. And when Microsoft started letting like a lot of things go through the door into the XBLA marketplace, they got in, and it was just one of the earliest examples of a fighting game. I remember at that time going, what is this? This is made by like fans. Like, let me try it out. And it's not a bad game. It's, the art style's a little, I don't know what to say about it, but there's a lot of passion and work put into it. And like Justin was saying, you get some crazy combo potential in this game, and a lot of the characters play very differently. And it even got a sequel, Battle High 2 A+, which is an A+ name for a school-themed fighting game. If Rival Schools is to come back, it should be called Rival Schools A+.
I mean, this is a very indie Rival Schools. That's what I was going to say. It's like indie Rival Schools. The characters look really crazy. Combos are cool. I mean, if I was going to high school and I saw a guy with like a Spencer's bionic arm, there's no way I'm going to school. Mom, transfer me to another school because things are about to get real over here in Battle High. But it's interesting because like when I just saw this, like literally before recording, I'm like, I wonder if it's on Steam. It's on Steam for $1.99. I instantly purchased it because obviously I need to try out this game. But overall, it has, like you said, it has its charm. Like, it's definitely something that I want to play for at least one stream. And I'm like, but can you commentate it? Sharpie, can you commentate this game?
I mean, I can commentate anything. I could commentate the paper that like flapping in the wind. You know, when you grow up with like a game as ridiculous as Skullgirls, like, you learn how to see everything inside of a video game. But it's really funny because I actually remember playing this back in college, Battle High 2.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I didn't like grow up being able to have like every single new console. So when I was in college, I actually got like a hand-me-down Xbox 360, and I had that whole Microsoft, you know, they used to have like the gold pass and stuff, and you could get a bunch of free games. This game was on rotation back then.
Yeah.
And so I was able to play this with some of my friends in college because there was a game we had a fighting game club called Video Game Club. So I met up with people there, and I would play this game with them. Actually, we only played once. I'm not going to lie to you. I only played it like once or twice. But as soon as I saw Michelle, I remembered her because she was actually one of the easiest people to mash with. Like, everything she did comboed into each other. And she has this other move that like allows this fire to come out literally basically across half screen, regardless of where they're coming in. Either it could be an anti-air. It can be like it beats different types of armor inside of the game. It beat bionic arm. And so I literally spammed that move when I played people. I wasn't good at the game, but I do remember playing it. It was pretty fun. It's definitely one of those games I think that touches the heartstrings when you see it, because you can tell that like it may not have been given the most attention, but the developers very clearly put a lot of work and time into creating the best product that they could at the time. And that was why I gravitated to it.
Because like I see like all the characters have like very different move sets. Like they're not just martial artists. Like there's a guy that makes rocks come out of the ground, and everyone kind of has a gimmick. And that's the thing that kind of shone through for me. It's like, yeah, it definitely has a very indie look, but there's people that love fighting games made this, and that's kind of what counts for an indie game essentially.
100%, I agree.
I was going to ask Sharpie, or any of the ones that are on here, because we don't have to go directly in order, because these are just a lot of the big featured ones that we've heard a lot about over the years.
Yeah.
Is there anyone that really pops out to you here that you either had a big amount of time with? Obviously, because Skullgirls is the premium of a lot of indie fighting games. Or is there anyone that really pops out to you that you spent some time with?
There are 3 on here that I know a lot about. Actually, to be honest with you, I know about 7 of them on this list.
Okay. Which one have you probably played the most?
Besides Skullgirls.
That would have to be actually a tie between Them's Fightin Herds and Mighty Fight Federation.
Let me see Mighty Fight again. Hold on a second. So
yeah, I actually never had a chance to play Mighty Fight Federation, but it just looks like this like insane wrestling brawler, Power Stone-ish type of vibe going on.
That's exactly what it was for me.
I feel like Matt made me play this game at some point in my life. Like maybe not, but
that sounds like me.
It definitely feels this way.
It sounds like
actually
me,
made
but I did
content
not.
For this game, I think I saw one of your videos on YouTube, but I'm really big about supporting indie game developers in general. So when I saw that they were making this, one of the things that popped out to me was that the person who made the music on this is actually an artist that I had been following from a musician I listened to a lot of called Brental Floss.
Oh, yeah.
Did this like whole game audio thing, but the guy that works on a game that Brental Floss made also did the music track for this, and I'm like a big fan of musicians, especially in game music. So when I found out they were making this game, and I was like, yo, how can I promote it? I covered it on stream, and I literally fell in love with the game. I never played Power Stone. The very first fighting game I can remember playing actually is probably a version of DOA. I don't remember the name of it. I just remember it's gonna sound really dumb, but I just remember the commands that I used in the combo that I played. But Mighty Fight Federation like really scratched a really big itch that I hadn't had in a very long time when it came to like having fun inside of fighting games again, because it was at a point in time where like I was playing Skullgirls but practicing competitively, and Justin, Max, you know that when you're playing a game competitively, you kind of like fall into this weird zone of I don't just care about having fun, I care about being good and being the best.
Oh yeah.
And so Mighty Fight Federation really brought that kind of back for me, that like, hey, you can just have fun and like still beat your friends in a really awesome way, which I enjoyed a lot.
There's an interesting balance of like of that point in your competitive like career when you're taking this stuff super seriously. I mean, Justin can attest it's been like his whole life for a certain degree, where just recently he's becoming a casual, quote unquote. But at least
slow transformation.
Slow transfer.
I'm surprised he even let you say that, honestly.
I am a casual player, bro.
He attests to
We
it
casual
now.
all day.
He lives by a certain
That's my
degree.
gimmick. That is my OS.
But yeah, like learning to not take it so seriously. And for me, it was like 10 straight years of my life of just like, this is my identity. Like in the from the late 90s to like the mid 2000s, I felt like it was everything about my identity was that competitive fighting game player, to eventually like loosen up a little bit. And it took me until I get to content creation to eventually get to that point. So I completely sympathize with you.
And like, even though this game is a lot about just having fun and being wacky and stuff, like it still has rollback net code. It still has a lot of solid fundamentals. And the crazy thing about it, when because I heard about it and played like an early demo of it when it was like just coming out or in early access, I forget what it was. But then like nowadays, like in the last couple of months or last year, they have all these crazy good guest characters like Ukulele is in this game.
I just saw Toe Jam and Earl in the trailer. I was like, what?
Toe Jam and Earl. Miriam from Bloodstain, the Castlevania like Kickstarter game, and like the two dudes from River City Ransom.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah, like Kunio and Ricky and stuff. And I'm like, whoa, they're getting some characters in this.
I feel like that's the way to go. Like almost just Shovel Knight is like, I guess, one of the other examples of like indie games that sort of expands
He's in
in
it
ways.
too.
Yeah. There you go. Like that's the perfect example of like how indie games and developers support their own IPs, but they also give their IPs to other devs to support them, to get them some eyes and stuff like that. And I'd imagine those don't cost a lot. I can't see the Ukulele guys being like, give us all the money. Like it really feels like they're trying to be there to support each other, because if one gets big, then it gives the chance for others to become big.
Yeah, like Shovel Knight's kind of like a glue to that, because he's appeared in like a couple of different fighting games, like one or two more on this very list, and there's even a few that he's in that's not. So like I really like that interconnected like indie fighting game multiverse that they kind of have going on right now.
So there's a couple on here that have some crazy stories that at least I'm really aware of in their early development, because I streamed, if not made videos on what the original version of this game was, which was a My Little Pony fighting game. At the time, my wife was super into the My Little Pony show because it was just everywhere. Yep. And we integrated a lot of its humor into Assist Me, funny enough. So I remember streaming it with myself, Simmons, and my wife, Jessica. And this was before the big change happened. And even we made some videos on like evil, greedy Hasbro Corp coming after indie fighters. It's like we made some videos of like, oh man, hatred is magic, like type stuff.
Hatred is magic, not like this.
But then everything changed. Like the theming of the game changed. The creator of the show actually helped them out because it was such a well-produced, good-looking fan game. It looked crazy just like the show. And now I feel like even next to like Skullgirls in terms of just overall presentation and just how the game looks and how much love and care is put into it, it's like them's Fightin Herds is like, in my opinion, right below Skullgirls, where they really gave a shit and went like 110,000% in this way. And I don't know how they did it. Like, I don't know how they had the money or the time or the budget or the consideration to do all the stuff that they crammed into that game. It's actually crazy to me. And now they have like cinematic supers in them's Fightin Herds. Like, I'm like, I gotta do it right the super on this game now. What the hell?
I think like some of these games, and this is a good example, is that they started off really slow with like, what was it, like 4 characters? Like there wasn't a lot. So they built it up over like years to get to this point. And like what I always want to know and get your guys' opinion on is like, ultimately, do you think it's better that's like we have our own game now? It's not tied to a license. Like, do you think that in the long term hinders or like helps it?
Real quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Sorry, yeah.
I'll open the floor afterwards. I actually have a really intimate story about this exact topic.
Go ahead.
Because one of the reasons I'm so adamant about supporting independent games is because I used to be a PM player. I actually played Project Melee back when it was first in development, and I knew the developers back when I was in college. So I had unfortunately got into a point inside of Melee where I wasn't really interested in playing anymore. Brawl had just come out, didn't really like Brawl, and I found Project Melee and I was like, wow, this is amazing. This is exactly what I want. They had to shut down because unfortunately the publisher, whose name I won't say because I would love to get jobs by them still, unfortunately decided that it wasn't what they wanted for their IP. Luckily, or I shouldn't say luckily, but as almost if in defiance, different developers have picked up the project and moved forward with it. So now we have Project Plus Plus. We have a couple of different iterations of it. We have Slippy, which is another version of Melee that allows netcode and everything like that. Super Smash Brothers was a very, very, very big platform fighter that introduced a lot of people to fighting games and other traditional fighting games, myself included. And the unfortunate thing was that because Project Melee was related to that IP, it didn't get to shine the way that I feel as though it could have.
Right.
It could have been the glue inside of our community to keep traditional fighting games and platform fighting games together. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case because the publisher decided not to do that.
Funny.
So in that instance...
In the same situation, I remember the PM devs like even reaching out to us and making like a custom video games version of it that had just like different banners and stuff. Like, wow, this is so nice of them to do this just because they just want to get it some eyes on the thing. But then soon after that, it was like, oh yeah, the category was removed on Twitch. This was at the same time where that same publisher, that rhymes with the word Temdendo, was also going crazy ham on like YouTubers and stuff and taking stuff like there was a certain like objective to go after fans. If anybody likes our shit, we're taking you down. Like,
you can't make money off of us.
Certain people don't remember this anymore, but there was definitely a time where like Twitch would actually not allow you to stream on their platform.
No, it was an illegal game to stream. Yeah, you were not allowed to stream it. And that's why whenever
I knew tournaments that disappeared from it.
That's why whenever we fire up like our Wii and we still have like a build on it and we just turn it on, if we're like, the stream's going down, stream's going down.
No, but I would say that's the unfortunate part because it seems like I guess from based off there and like you say like PM, a lot of people really enjoyed it, and during the time Brawl wasn't like the best game that people really enjoyed. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, damn, so a fan made a better game than us, we can't let that game rock, right? So I guess a lot of times IPs could be threatened, even if it's just fan made. And like you mentioned with them Fightin Herds, that was kind of like the thing where they just like, you cannot use our characters and blah 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 blah. Hasbro's not about it.
Was the core issue like you're making our characters fight in a combative experience, and that's why we don't like. No,
from Hasbro or for PM?
It's
Hasbro.
for Hasbro.
Sorry, Hasbro.
The issue is, I can almost attest, just based on how many times this has happened and how many times I've reported on it. It is not an issue of like what is happening. It's not like it's literally stuff that you're going to find in the seediest parts of the internet. No, this was just like our characters are doing things without our control. And that's what it's about. It's about setting a precedent of control. Is that we just can't let people do whatever the hell they want willy-nilly. And yes, should Hasbro have stepped in and just bought them out? Like, you know what? Yeah, we should just set aside of game development division and just use a small amount of budget to support these people, but just essentially give them paychecks for it. That's the best thing that you could. That's like essentially what happened to Sonic Mania, you know, which is the best case scenario for Sonic the fucking Hedgehog now. But they didn't do that because at that time in the early 2010s, that division, the licensing division of Hasbro, was just go after them. Same thing with Nintendo. Like, everyone didn't know how to approach fan work in any way, so they just sniped them. Right? You just take them out. Like, just make sure that nobody ever gets to experience that ever again.
It was so around the time, I do want to say for context, it was around the time when you had a very vocal voice inside of, I would say, mainstream gaming about promoting the negatives inside of video games. You had people like the angry video game nerd. You had a lot of really large, like Dark Phil was a very big voice inside of gaming in general at that time.
I refuse to believe it.
I'm just saying things. Max, I'm saying this
totally
because
right.
I've worked very closely with a lot of developers on this list, and while I have signed NDAs, I'm trying to be very careful about how I navigate that. But I do know that these are conversations that publishers have with the developers, because even though they see the fighting game community as positive forces, and Max, I know your name has come up multiple times inside these conversations about the positive inside the FGC. The problem is ultimately the general gamer is not always coming to your channel first. And there are larger voices inside of gaming than just the FGC that these publishers have to worry about.
Yeah, I
and
completely
that's
understand.
ultimately where it comes from. Yep. So I'm not saying that Hasbro wasn't in the wrong for shutting them down the way they do. I agree with you in that regard, because I very much so would have loved to see Main 6 succeed with Hasbro and become a bigger part of a larger IP.
Absolutely.
It's just unfortunate.
And in this situation, it is likely better for them, because who knows? Like, we're seeing a much different industry now where it's essentially like we even get Sega, where they're like, hey, you know what? Let's just give fans the ability to make our games for relatively low cost. And you're practically seeing new Streets of Rage, new Panzer Dragons, new House of the Dead games. And it's like, actually, this is incredible. I'll take something than absolutely nothing, you know?
For sure.
It reminds me a little bit of the situation. You know those old GameCube Godzilla fighting games that were multiplayer? Right?
Oh my god, yeah!
The 4-player ones, right?
The 4-player ones, I remember reading a story about one of the devs that said we had to spend so much time going back and forth with Toho about every single animation, because they're like, we don't like you just do. I think Godzilla can get his toes burned on things, and he holds his toe and he's like, ouchie, ouch, ouch. And they're like, we have to fight for that. Because they're like, that's too silly. I'm like, that's too silly. Godzilla
doesn't do that.
Godzilla does stupid shit all the time. So they're just like lamenting how we could have had a couple more characters in there. We could have fleshed out this system a bit more if we had more time, but we had to spend so much of it going back and forth, like getting every animation approved. And I think in like them's Fightin Herd case, it's probably, like, in my opinion, it's probably better off.
Yeah.
Could it have sold more back in the day, coasting on the MLP name? Sure. But I mean, right now, we might not even be talking about it, but them's Fightin Herds is like new and hot. It's going to be at, or by the time you guys see this, it's going to have been at EFO. Like, that's insane when you think about it.
And it probably was down to, what was her name? Lauren Faust, I think, which was the original creator, like the spearhead of the show at the time. Yeah. Actually recognized how much work they did and almost wanted to back it, but couldn't because she's not the owner of the property. Yeah. It's Hasbro. So she essentially helped them out by providing like character design and assistance on their actual own independent game. So that's fantastic. That's an idea of that. There's a lot more steps involved outside of even the creators, where they can't in this industry they can't be responsible for everything, but they can at least help out in some small way.
Yeah, and I think the coolest thing is like even with like their own individual characters, they look so good, right? The fact that they have like their own archetypes, their combos, just like
lost her.
all the variety. I think she got plushies or something. Maybe she's gonna bring them out. But in general,
I'm actually really proud of this. I just want to
it.
show it because I'm literally so proud of this. I'm sorry.
She's gonna bring a toy.
It was designed by Lauren Foss. I love you so much, Lauren. If you ever see this, please hit me up.
That's so cool.
I always forget the name of the characters in the game, but I love the llama. The personality that the llama character has, and also the really shy sheep. Like, and I love like the fact that they do really weird, like kind of like psycho character archetypes, completely different than what normal fighting games are, because they have like characters that don't feel like they should be in a fighting game, but they are. So it's, I don't know, it's cool.
So good. No, yeah, the archetypes that they use are just like so unique, and everything about it is just like, it's just so charming, right? So I'm like, I hope they keep coming out with like new characters, more DLC and everything like that, just because like, I mean, the ball's in their court. It's endless when it comes down to it.
Exactly. It's endless. Like they're even for DLC characters, they don't have to report to someone. Now, this is like an edge case where it's like everything just worked out so well because everyone could see like the passion of the team. But like in a lot of cases when like people try to, you know, like not infringe on an IP, but like get close to it, and then everything just gets shut down and the team disbands. So this is like the optimal almost ending to it, rather than where it goes like, I don't know, 75% of the time, which is everyone just stops.
Yeah.
You know, that's the negative part of it, unfortunately. What do we have next, Justin?
So let's see. I would say let's go with Punch Planet, right? This is another game that's going to be at Evo as a side tournament. There's a $500 pop bonus for this year's Evo for Punch Planet. And I played a bit of this game, and I would say I know a bit about this game because when I used to stream Street Fighter 4, the guy, the pretty much one of the developers, Willpower, he would come in and be like, "Hey man, I'm making this game called Punch Planet. You got to check it out," and blah blah blah. And I mean, he went from there to now, and the game is officially out. Has so many different type of archetype characters. It has kind of like a Third Strike feel of it. Very kind of like retro futuristic type of style.
It looks so awesome.
Yeah, when it comes to characters as well too, and like they're just keeping coming out with like multiple things. So it's really awesome to see like somebody that I used to play just online rank match with making a fighting game like this, and now it's at Evo. I think it's like really cool, and it seems like you know a bit about it, Sharp, because you got hyped pretty much when I mentioned
I am really hype. I'm a Tira main. Like, I love her.
Yes.
Tira, Tyra, whatever. But, like, dog inside of that game, if you have ever been looking for something incredibly degenerate where you can just go in, rush them down, and every single thing plus you gotta play dog. Like, that game is so incredibly polished. I had an opportunity to play it at one of the very first, like, I think like the second or third tournaments I went to called NEC back in like either 2016, 2017 or so. They were showing the game off there. And I was like, I want to say not as big as I am now, you know, like mentally I'm in the same place I was then, but like in terms of Twitter followers, I had significantly less, so no one cared about who I was. And so like they showed off the game. I really enjoyed it. I tried to start incorporating it into monthlies that I had over at Xanadu, and it always performed very well, actually. There are a lot of people who don't know the game just because the IP is unique and is brand new, and it's not like an old known game or anything like that, but the amount of polish that they put into everything, the amount of work that they put into making sure that rollback netcode and GGPO is a part of it, the amount of effort that they put into making sure that streams are accessible, that the community is able to get changes made when they need to, that developer support is active and responsive in not only the game but also inside of public avenues like Twitter and Discord. That is par none to really any other fighting game out there, with the exception of, I personally feel, Skullgirls, to be very candid with you. A lot of developers won't do that. Like Iron Galaxy did it with KI. They unfortunately had to take a step back when it got a little bit toxic, of course. Like Bandai did that a little bit with Dragon Ball, and then as soon as it started getting toxic, they took a step back. Tekken, Obviously, Bandai took a huge amount of community voices in there and started kind of taking a step back when it started getting negative. Like, don't ask me for shit.
Yeah, the scale of it's an interesting topic because the scalability of it is really important, and it's like you could essentially allow your audience to get away with a certain amount of stuff, but if the game gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you essentially have to start pulling back because there's just too many voices or too much discourse or too many, like, one side of my audience is now fighting with another side of my audience. Like, that's not good. You know, you just want to kind of avoid that at all costs.
100%. And I feel like Punch Planet is in a place where they understand that the community is going to be very passionate about their game right now, and they've allocated resources, albeit from the very limited pool that they have of resources, to making sure that the community feels heard and respected inside of their game.
That's great.
Which is something that I always love to hear and talk about and tell other people to get them to support it, because I genuinely do believe the people, I believe it's like a 3 or 4 person team actually. At
it's really small.
Yeah. It's very small, because I remember when I first played it, there was only Roy and whatever the dog's name, right?
Dog.
It's just dog.
Okay, it's just dog.
Literally dog.
Okay, yeah, because I played it was only 2 characters at a time. Now there's like a bunch of characters, like you said, Tira, Max, and then I just remembered they also have a mobile version of it on your phone.
Do.
I heard about
this. They do.
Yeah, they have a mobile version of Punch Planet. It's
Really?
even on the description of the videos, it's the Apple logo and Apple Arcade, our trademarks of Apple, and you can get it for free. Yeah, it's free and everything, and you could play the game on
I'm
there
like
as well,
downloading
too.
it right now.
yeah. So
I didn't know
the fact,
this.
Yeah, so the fact that it's also like just accessible for mobile, because when it comes down to it, like indie fighting games, you might not know it because it's like it's hard to find, but mobile just like people playing mobile is just so huge, and it brings up like their audience a lot, like you mentioned with Skullgirls Mobile earlier.
Dude.
before we start the podcast, right? So the fact that Punch Planet also has a mobile version, it definitely will just help to kind of like their just to get their name out there a lot more.
I still can't believe it that after Injustice 1, that not every single big fighting game dev as well did not also in tandem release a mobile version of the game that syncs and works with the console. I still can't believe that we don't live in a world that is that. Like, that's crazy. That made them so much money. It spun off an entire mobile division of fighting games. Like, and it can't be that expensive to essentially like sideline a mobile version of your game to essentially allow to complement your console version or your main platform version.
It is very expensive. It is very, very, very expensive. It is very expensive. You need specific developers.
It's a different team,
Type, a completely different team. In no way, shape, or form is it the same set of tools. And I want to say that from experience, from knowing exactly what it takes to run Skullgirls Mobile, as well as Skullgirls Second Encore. And I just want to take 1 second, because I know this game isn't on the list here, but I believe at minimum, Justin is familiar with this game called Tough Love Arena. That game is also available on mobile.
Oh wow! I didn't because mainly it was a browser game, right? Like, and then it worked so well. We had rollback. You know, the Panda made us do a video about it, and it really had like the most simple controls, but the meta was there. It was super fun, and a lot of us were just playing it. And I did not know there was a mobile version now. That's actually kind of sick.
Paul, one of the developers for the game. There's only 2 people on that team. I believe his name is Paul. And he works with another person who does like literally all of the art and all the animation and everything. I believe he stated that there were thoughts regarding making it available to also be played on your phone. So they're currently in works of doing that right now. But you can go ahead and open up the phone. You can open up your phone literally and go inside of like a browser to toughlovearena.com and play it from your phone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because he wanted to get that accessibility available for people, so that if they had like a wireless controller that could sync up or a Bluetooth controller that could sync up with their phone, they could play it. And that was just like such a crazy moment for me to hear from a developer actively thinking about how mobile could be a part of their fighting game, even if it's just mostly built for browser.
Yeah.
Mobile could still be accessible there. And I was like, that's wild.
It's so crazy, like you said, like Max, where you would think that all these bigger companies would make a mobile version. I mean, I'm still waiting for Street Fighter Duel for like 5 years already. I just see it on Capcom Fighter streams. Coming soon, global coming soon. I'm like, bro, when is coming soon mean? It's been like 2 years.
What about Volt? What about Street Fighter 4 Volt?
Right, you got paid for that though.
That that one
that was like
definitely-
$5.99.
That was a compliment, but it was the early era of mobile gaming,
which wasn't that great back then. Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
I would
fair
say
enough.
I think Capcom just kind of like didn't want to go into the mobile world. Like they still do with like specific games that make them like lots of money, like kind of like Mega Man and everything. But I would say one game that they tried to push really hard and it failed and they closed down the studio was Puzzle Fighter. But I was so sad, man. Puzzle Fighter, it was such a money grab so
Yeah,
hard.
but
like,
it wasn't
literally
Puzzle Fighter
can't
though,
win.
right?
I know it wasn't.
Yeah.
It was money Puzzle Fighter. That's what it comes down to. But it's kind of crazy that you have all these indie fighting games making the mobile version, because another one that's a really popular indie fighting game that also has a mobile version, Footsies by our favorite Twitter, High Fight.
I didn't know about this one, so I was intrigued when you added it to the list. I was like, oh, I didn't see. Again, you could like do some research and get a list, but there's always going to be one or two cool things you don't know about.
And there's one on here that I have to mention because it's also an interesting story. But yeah, we need to talk about Footsies because this is like small, I think 1-man team or very small team. And
one person.
Yeah, I think it's one person. Yeah, and it's the person that usually clips all of like crazy tournament highlights, personal streams, any cool moments in FGC like competitively. He will just like highlight it and put it on the Twitter. So that he also made this game called Footsies, and I would call it modern day Karate Champ. That's really what it comes down to.
I think it's like grounded dive kick.
Grounded dive kick, that one's too.
That's a really good way of describing it.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. It's literally like
So it's just kick then.
It's just
kick. You're just with punishing the other opponent. That's what it comes down to. And they added like lots of cool moves. They have parries. You even have a raging demon. You could do a raging demon, and just kind of like play that. It uses kind of like the Ryu like kind of framework of like his moves in general. But it's definitely something that it's super easy to get into. And everybody can play it. Like there's videos of people playing on their phones against like each other, like Japanese players versus pro players. It was pretty poppin' too, for sure.
It's definitely in the same vein as like Nidhogg, where instead of swords
about to say, I was just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's very much like that, except a very focused fighting game like Battlefield. Not that much space, not that much walk speed. Nidhogg's like running around and stabbing and stuff. So it's around that same feel.
Okay, cool.
I wonder, just in general, before we move on to the next game, would everybody inside of here, starting with Matt, actually classify, because you all obviously remember Newgrounds and Flash games, would you classify those games as also independently made fighting games? Because we now live in a world where obviously you can release a game like Footsies exclusively on Twitter, get your entire audience ready, but if we had gone back, let's just say even 10 years, honestly, that would have been a game that you would see on Newgrounds.
Oh, yeah.
For
sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think so.
Starting with Matt, how do you feel about that?
About like what part specifically? Like
about indie games as compared to like games that would have been just considered Flash games.
Oh, okay. I think it really took until now for things to start like being in an environment where indie games weren't like viewed as the secondary sort of thing, like towards AAA games. So anything like I'd say maybe even 7 years, but 10 years certainly. It's just like things just like Skullgirls. That's why Skullgirls is such a success, because it was able to break away and get such a big community and such passion towards it. But like almost anything else was a uphill struggle. But nowadays it's actually like a bit easier for if people see quality in an indie looking game, like it could rise past that sort of, oh, this is just a Newgrounds, this is just a Flash game, or it's a whatever. I find that mentality is kind of like ebbed away in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I think like now's the time for that. But like 10 years ago, it was really rough out there.
And even with Skullgirls, like it's a game that has lasted so long and has essentially had a supportive growing community. Like it is kind of like the golden definition of what's possible with an indie fighting game that is not based on an existing IP, that has its own original roster. And these are the big challenges that fighting games just in general have, where how do we get people excited about our game if it's not based on, a Tekken or Street Fighter or an anime or a huge property? Is like an NFL fighting game, like something that isn't taking from some fiction that you're really excited about. and creating something brand new and creating its own world and the challenges that come with that and how expensive all that is. Skullgirls seem to tackle that like head on, where it's like, oh yeah, we're just gonna dive right in, create our own fiction, create our own world, and it sort of was the basis for that.
I like that. Justin, do you have any thoughts on it?
No, I mean, I used to play Flash games like all the time growing up. Like I remember still the first Flash game I played. It wasn't on Newgrounds, but it was by like a big company, Cartoon Network, where they had the Teen Titans fighting game.
I was literally thinking Teen Titans when I brought up this question.
Of the Flash games. That was the one I was playing on CartoonNetwork.com or whatever the website was. But it played really bad, but it was really cool because I was a huge fan of like the cast and the show, and like my favorite character on the show was Raven, so I was just playing Raven. There was no online. It was just kind of you just play
Raven was your main
training mode. That was my main. Those type
of busted, bro.
Yeah, those type of characters. But I love those type of games. Anytime there was like those Flash games for fighting games, I was on it for sure. So, but that was the one that really stood out to me growing up as a kid, like as a kind of like a sort of indie title. But yeah, for the Flash games, like. Like Tough Love Arena is kind of like a modern day like Flash game if you think about it, because it's on browser-ish, right? But in like as long as it plays good, as long as it has like you can see like the charm and the individual like artwork and the style and the love, it's great. Like, so the fact that it was you brought that up like from like back in the day, I'm like, damn, I remember what game I played. So it was pretty fun. But then let's see, another game that I would say talks about like a lot of different IP, a lot of characters you were mentioning, like how Skullgirls made it to the point where it got like so huge that it kind of it's past that indie title. I would say is Blade Strangers from Nicholas. They have really popular characters. Obviously Binding of Isaac is one of the most popular indie games of all time, but he is a playable character. Shovel Knight's a playable fighting game character as well too. A bunch of Cave Story characters. So that's like another game that's like very interesting, I would say, just because it uses a lot of like characters from the games that they publish. Right.
Like, it's a mix of like a few Western characters, but a lot of like indie Japanese characters. Like there's the 3DS game Code of Princess, which was actually had all the characters designed by, I can't say our good friend because we don't know them. Kinyu Nishimura. Max.
Oh, okay. That game.
Yeah, that game. The princess character, right? So she's in there, and this game plays like pretty fun. It's like fun at first, but then it's like it just dropped off the earth. And one thing I know about Nicholas is that they'll put out a game and then just drop it. They were the ones that were going to publish Yatagarasu, and then Yatagarasu never came out for all the ports that it was promised to have. They can sometimes put a thing out, but then once it hits, they like support just stops. And I don't think, did Blade Strangers ever get any DLC or anything? Does anyone have any memory of the? No,
I played it once on my channel, and that was about it.
Yeah, exactly. You played it then.
Yeah.
But it was still cool. It had simplified command inputs for things, didn't it?
Yes, it does. It has. There's no motion inputs. It's pretty much like kind of Smash style, like neutral special, back special, up special, down special. But it has a lot of interesting, I would say, mechanics. They have like kind of like, they're not a Roman cancel, but they have EX moves. They have parries as well too. So that the supers you can do like level 1, level 2, level 3 supers. So they had a lot of elements where a lot of common fighting games have, because they also have like a lot of like charge specials where you could do a bunch of ground bounces and wall bounces. So the comp system's pretty deep in the game for sure. But definitely what I would say that, like you were saying, that there wasn't that many like support for kind of like like maybe fixes or like patches or anything like that, or DLCs. It was like, all right guys, we made a game with all these cool characters that you love so much. Here you go. That was kind of like that's
kind of it.
So Matt mentioned a pretty interesting story where you're talking about like ex fighting game devs that go on to make their own fighting game, and you suddenly like sparked a game that I played a long time ago, and I think we've tried every couple of times, bordering on the absolute teetering edge of risque. Who's played Vanguard Princess?
Oh my, I have.
I don't think
ridiculously. a very good-looking game. It's like, geez,
Very
they put some
good-looking.
time into this artwork, but I had to look it up. Essentially, fully developed by like one person, an ex-Capcom
Isn't it
sprite
like
designer.
Third Strike guy? Like he worked on Third Strike?
They worked on Resident Evil 3 and King of Fighters Neo Blood and several other titles within Capcom and SNK.
Okay.
And they went on to
sure.
make their own fighting game. I'm just gonna solo it. Don't worry. So yeah, it's a very like you can still get it. I just looked it up. It's still being teetering on like Anime Expo. It's like so they're trying to like promote it in some way. But I remember hearing of that just very early on. Like, wait a minute, one person just decided to make a fighting game like 10 years ago or something like that. So just the fact that does exist, where you get devs that splinter off even on the Japanese end from the mainstream, where they try to go do their own thing. Yatagarasu's kind of like another one in some way.
Yeah, it's
And
similar.
They just yeah, I'm just gonna solo this whole game. Don't worry about it.
It's like it's put a number on the board because it's been this many days since Vanguard Princess
Has been
has
mentioned.
brought.
Oh God.
I do want to add that, like, in addition, just on the production side of game making, there are certain engines, such as, obviously, I don't want to say the Mugen engine, which used to be the only engine that, like, really allowed you to make a fighting game, but Unreal 4, Unreal 5 now being out, and several other Unity-based engines actually allow it to be a lot more easier on developers to construct a game all by themselves, which I think is like a
true.
testament to the knowledge of that Capcom developer, because if they'd been working on fighting games for a really long time, seeing these entire teams tackle these problems and understood how to properly like format them and basically create a workflow for it, it's very possible. It's just, who's going to do all of that essentially for free without getting their bills paid, right? Except for someone with an extreme passion for it, right?
And I think
that's what
go ahead.
I think that's what makes the fighting game community so precious to me personally, is the fact that we are filled with individuals and people that are willing to support people like that.
Yeah.
At any cost. Like, did I play SNK Heroines? Yes. Did I enjoy it? No. Did I think it was a good game? No. But I played it because I was going to give it a chance because they tried.
Yeah.
They tried. They attempted. An attempt was made. Would I tell my mother that I played that game? Never in my life.
Yeah.
That would be a great subtitle for the game. SNK Heroines, an attempt was made.
Yeah.
An attempt was made. Did
it not have
that's
a
a good
jump
slogan.
button? I think it did, right?
It did, didn't
It
it?
had a jump button.
It had a jump. There was no way to block low.
What?
Wait,
what?
It was essentially like it was a
There
very,
wasn't.
very bad game. There were things that would hit you low and you couldn't block them because you couldn't block low, because blocking low would have been too complicated inside of that game. There were supers that completely ruined the screen, and I mean literally pixelated it. You couldn't show it on stream. We tried to run the tournament once at Xanadu, and I actually got a call from the owners of Xanadu to immediately cut the game off stream because the stream was about to be taken down by Twitch. Like, it was a whole thing.
They're going to say like the FBI contacted.
I've never ever been concerned about like my job as a tournament organizer, except when I got that call, and I was like, you know what? I am playing with fire. I am doing that. So that's valid.
That's what you were mentioning earlier, how it's like Unity and these other big engines like Unreal and stuff like that. I do remember there being a big outcry of especially like Unity users, because Unity was a very universal engine that there are a lot of like teaching is done with Unity in general because its licensing was relatively cheap, and the licensing for Epic and its engines can be a bit more expensive every once in a while. So if you actually put out a game in Unity that has a ton of documentation and an absolutely 10 years of people that have just been working on it, there's a lot of easy ways to troubleshoot stuff and solve problems that you might have run into that somebody else could essentially help you out with. So that makes a lot of sense.
There are a lot of games now that are coming out, like even outside of the fighting game sphere. I host Game Devs of Color Expo, which promotes independent games primarily made by people of color, queer individuals, and femmes, and non-binary people across the globe. And one of the things I've noticed is that they are all actively working on using Unity because it is an accessible platform that allows anybody and everybody to create.
Yeah, the takeover is made on Unity too, and like watching someone build stuff on it, I was like, you built a afterburner level and like a driving level within this beat 'em up, and they're like, he's like, yeah, Unity, and I'm like, okay, cool. I didn't
Like
know.
a month.
Unity.
Yeah, exactly.
To like
exactly.
literally several years, which is what you used to have to do with these old systems. And so it's literally such a refreshing take on the independent game genre and the fighting game genre in general.
Yeah.
So really, you brought up like a really fantastic point the more I think about it, because it's like, that's why we're seeing more indie fighting games now more than ever, because back in the day you had to like make your own custom
There's more
engine.
documentation now.
Exactly. Yep. And like, I'm like, we haven't like gone down like a full list of what all these games use specifically, but I have to think that Unity, or at least like some form of Unreal, has been using at least a few of them.
You just have to think of like the situational,
specifically. Oh, sorry.
Like just moment to moment. Like, okay, so how do I create a character with fireballs? How do I create a character that has moving different trajectory fireballs? Like this was an issue that even the KI devs had with their early versions of KI, where they just couldn't change the speed of some things. They just couldn't change like its trajectory or how it moves. They had to get another developer eventually with the same engine to change that stuff.
Yeah, because they're using the Buffy the Vampire Slayer engine.
They literally were.
Yeah.
TFH, or Them's Fighting Herds, is a really good example of it because it uses the exact same engine that was made for Skullgirls. The developer has gone on record several times in conversations saying there are certain things we wanted to make, like with Oleander and their projectiles, that we literally could not do in Mugen, that we're able to do with the Z engine, because it was literally created to do that. Fuko inside of Skullgirls has a projectile that bounces on the ground. That is impossible to do inside of Mugen.
Yeah.
That is literally impossible. You can do it very easily inside of the Z engine, and that is one of the reasons why TFH raised so much money to make it so that it was possible, and that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so many characters come out with so many sufficiently different kits, because it's more available in that engine than it was in the previous one.
This is the interesting part of like game dev that you don't really hear about, where it's like everyone just thinks of something that could be in a game and we should just be able to do that, right? But the actual like engineering behind game development is that we have no idea how to get that system online or to make it functional in any way. It's going to take us so long, just drop it, right? And it's one of the reasons why a lot of fighting games, because like Street Fighter 4 essentially was like the beginning of the idea that we can make a fighting game and use this as like a premise. Post Street Fighter 4, like the indie revolution sort of beginning, people had the idea that they can make their own things. But a lot of indie fighting games sort of felt like Street Fighter 4 in many ways, and that's only because like there was just a lack of documentation. There was just a lack of what people could actually do with the engines they had. So they were emulating what they had seen and what had worked before. But nowadays we're getting to the era of like Skullgirls characters and characters in between all these games, Punch Planet, that have really unique mechanics because people are just better at this. People are just better at the actual dev part of like, okay, so I want to make some crazy character with a crazy mechanic. How the hell do I even do that?
Man, yeah. And speaking of crazy dev parts when making like indie fighting games, I would say the next one is something that I know Sharpie knows a lot about, and I'm super excited to play this game when it comes out, because just like looking at the video and the combos, it looks like I'm watching an anime.
I already know what game you're talking about.
Fighters. I'm like, bro, this is not even a fighting game. This is like a movie at this point. Just like looking at the combos, like it just looks so crazy. It really feels like an animation from like a AAA studio when it comes down to like seeing the combos, the moveset, the way like hits work, the special moves and everything like that. And it also really has a super charm, unique personality to it, especially just like judging from the trailer alone.
So the thing I can tell you is I've spoken with both of the developers. They are a brother duo. They're literally two brothers, and they are both under the age of 25.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, they started the creation of the game literally when they turned 19. They've been working on it for a while, a little bit of time. Two people, Light and Love, are their names, and they've literally been creating this game. It is going to be at EVO this year. They will have a booth. You can go ahead and examine the game. The game got completely funded with over $40,000, I believe. But as we probably all know, that's not anywhere near enough to like make probably what they want to make. So their Patreon is available, and I do highly recommend that, like, if anyone is very interested in this game and wasn't able to get to the Kickstarter, that they do give to the Patreon and join the Discord just to support these developers, because what I've seen inside of this game and what I've seen from both the developers is that they are very invested in making sure that the next generation of the fighting game community remains as proactively, I want to say, proactively stimulated with opportunities to grow inside of fighting games, because there is a large conversation inside the fighting game community right now about ease of access, right? About we should make things more accessible, we should make things easier, we should like do this and make it less complicated. And they are actively, just the two of them, trying to find a way of literally finding people that are between the ages of like 18 and 22 and seeing, hey, what level do you all want? Like ignoring everybody else, what level do you all want from your video game, specifically from your fighting game, and what level are you comfortable with? And they're actively working with, like, I would call them kids because I'm over the age of 30.
They're
you know,
kids.
so
they're kids.
But they're literally
They're kids.
children. Yeah, right? Like they're the same age as like my youngest brother over here talking to me about, yeah, Sharpie. So you know, we just went ahead and implemented this new mechanic that adds less decay because we noticed that a lot of people were falling out of combos and we thought that just wasn't fun. And I was like, stop talking to me, youngin. Yeah, I know these words.
You're too young.
You know,
You're not supposed to know this.
my mechanics are still very sharp, even though my reactions are not. Like, come on now. It's disrespectful, but in a very real sense, they're actively working with people that I feel the fighting game community has not necessarily been focused on speaking to, or even trying to access, because I feel like a large amount of these demographics of people, even inside of other independent fighting games, are focusing on that 25 to 35 demographic, specifically of people that present as male or recognized as male. And I feel like Five Force Fighters is doing something amazing in the sense that they're working to expand our community beyond the reaches that Street Fighter or KOF or Tekken can do.
Yeah.
And I think Drag Her, a team that's primarily made of queer developers, which is focusing on making a fighting game for drag queens, is actually doing the exact same thing too. Yeah, it is very good. We have very big name like drag queens in there, like Bendela Creme is in there, Jiggly is in there. I know you guys have no clue who I'm talking about. These are very, very big drag stars that I am very in tune with, and I know a lot of the queer community is in tune with. So it's like, it's nice to see everybody going for different demographics while still being able to come back to the FGC and be like, we still made something that we know that you all will enjoy, that will do you justice inside of the fighting game community.
Right. For like audio listeners, just to give this, because this game needs a little bit of a description. It's Five Force Fighters because there's like 5 super powered teens, and like their combos and everything are extremely cinematic looking because everything has this like insane flow from move to move to move. And there's a lot of Dragon Ball influence in there. There's like certain like Broly attacks where someone's grabbing someone's head and about to like crush into the ground. And I just, when making this list, I had found this game. I didn't know about it before. I never came across it, and I was like, what is this now? And that's the cool thing about like, you know, going into a deep dive in the indie fighting game scene. Like I already mentioned once before, it's like there's always something else that someone is doing that, again, thankfully looks unique compared to everything else. And they have like a bunch of different modes that they're promising, like a story mode and all these different skins and colors and stuff, and the characters are all unique too. And I'm really glad I found this one. And just in case when we were putting this list together, Sharpie's like, you gotta add Five Force Fighters.
I didn't know there was a second page.
That's totally
and
fine.
It was on the second page, but like I wanted to make sure this game got shine because to me, this game is that next Skullgirls, to be very candid with you. This game is the one that an entire generation of players, like my very first traditional fighter that I ever competed in was Skullgirls. The only game I had played in before that was Melee.
And a little bit of DOA, if I recall.
A little. Well, to be very candid with you, I played a little bit of DOA when I was like literally 3. And then the very first fighting game I remember sitting down and playing combos in was actually Mortal Kombat 6 Deadly Alliance. And I remember getting Frost from the Crypt, playing through her entire story and learning combos. But this game reminds me of where I was mentally, like in college, when I was looking for a game to occupy my time that I could become competitive in. This game, to me, represents the same type of drive that I felt then, that I know a lot of other people who may not necessarily be inside the community now will feel when they get an opportunity to play it, because they'll just be so enamored by it and be so enamored by the fact that there is a competitive community for it with developers that support it in some way, shape, or form.
Cool.
And don't shut it down when a fan decides to make a branch off version of it.
It's funny how like that makes me think of the ultimate like the goal, right? Because you have all these indie devs that are essentially jumping in out of literally passion. Like the biggest goal you have is that you start something out of passion and you turn it into your career. So the idea behind this is that I think the big hope for a lot of people is because not everyone's going to become a Skullgirls, you know, or like a thing that can support a studio and get a lot of people and hire everybody and have your own franchise. I think like what I wish would happen, and I think this will be an eventuality, is that all these indie fighting game devs exist, and they clearly love and have a passion for these franchises that are just being ignored by a lot of companies nowadays, right? That they like things like, I don't know, Bloody Roar, or things like Power Stone, or things that just refuse to exist in the modern day. But there's clearly a ton of people that really give a shit, if not put time into making the games that are just like that.
Yeah, all of Matt's favorite games do not get any love. That's pretty much what you're saying.
Max saying Bloody Roar refuses to exist is so sad and cruel, but it's so true.
I hate it. I don't like that. That's the truth. But the idea is that I do wish that something like we mentioned earlier with Sega that allow people to make a Streets of Rage game, allow people to go make Sonic games, you know, actually does exist in some way, where eventually you get some of these devs that approach some of these other folks that make Punch Planet or make Five Force Fighters or make games that are Power Stone like, and go out to them and be like, hey, you know what? We're not doing anything with this. Would you like to, we could hire you to do something and maybe not have to be like the worst thing in the world. Like, I really hope that that's a future for indie fighters where they eventually just get picked up.
Well,
yeah, that's true.
Well, a cool thing that we've mentioned it once before, and we'll probably talk about it again when more information comes out. But going back to Project L for a second, it was
this is the one I wanted to mention. Yeah,
exactly. Hey, how about we branch out to different studios that know this genre, and then like have them make a version of that. It's like I'm not going to say what Capcom or other big publishers should do, but you should do this every so often. Like make another not Street Fighter thing that is smaller in scope and all this, but I know there's so many working parts and things, and it's a lot to organize and whatever, but like, you know, everything Mac's saying has just made me think like a new Bloody Roar could exist.
Yeah.
A new War Gods could exist, but they refuse to.
Vampire Savior could exist.
Yeah. That's true too.
They made money off of it literally earlier this year, like.
And what you mentioned with Project L is like the basis of that example, where you essentially had an indie dev. You have Radiant that made Rising Thunder, that was completely an independent made game. That was just a few people with some ideas and some experience with rollback netcode, obviously, since they made it, but they got picked up. They didn't even get a chance to finish their game. Like, their game was not nearly complete by any means, and they got 100%. Picked up all of a sudden to make a League of Legends fighting game. So you know, and that game is going through a whole different tumultuous development that has been going on and on. But still, like that is essentially like a dream situation that, oh, you guys have the ability to do something great. Here's our IP. Go nuts. You know, it's in the same way where it's like, even I feel like games like recently came out like Sifu, and I'm like, God, this is so sick. And it's like, it feels like a relatively focused project with a small development team. How sick would it be if they just gave this guy the Matrix IP? Just let them have the Matrix and make a Matrix game. Like, this would be so cool.
Here's what I wish, and as someone that's worked with multiple developers and seen like the development of KI firsthand, I know you'll understand what I mean when I say this, Max, but I really wish they would stop requiring developers to outbid other indie teams with a complete concept and put down all this money on spec
the industry
before they pick them up. Like, I genuinely wish that. I genuinely wish there was, before that, there was a time period where you could basically do that just off of Kickstarter. There's enough interest for my game, pick me up. And people would give you a blank check. And now it's, well, there's enough interest for my game, now show us that you have an audience by making the game and showing that people love the game. Maybe we'll give you a check. And my fear is the very next step will be, you have now shown that you can make the game. You've shown that there's an audience. Now support it for 5 years, and then we'll pick you up. And that is what terrifies me.
You are perfectly describing like not even an indie game situation, but the issue of the entire like industry, where this
Oh, no!
this is where like even entire game development studios will go under, because like you're describing the trial period, right, where a not a proof of concept, but there's a pitch that essentially that this company is looking for someone to make this game, and it's a race to whoever can make the most impressive thing the fastest. And sometimes the companies will have varying degrees of how polished and how good that is going to be, and will literally spend like a ton of their own individual assets and money trying to get that thing off the floor, and it doesn't work out, and they're just toast. So
and they have to close.
Exactly. Like that's like a large part of the industry.
I mean, Telltale, that literally happened to them. Like, I don't know if you all heard, but literally what basically happened, the reason why they went under, even though they had so many successful games, is they were trying to bid for an unknown project. And they basically crunched all of their developers, sunk all of their resources into it, and then
didn't
lost
get it.
the bid.
And this is like the one of the saddest parts of the industry, is that some really good games are made and essentially like beyond alpha in some ways, and they just don't go anywhere. Like we hear a lot about it on What Happened, which is nice that Matt can like document it in some way, but it's sad that that's essentially the tryouts. Those are the auditions of the video game industry, and indies have to go through the same thing.
Speaking of which, I have an upcoming episode of What Happened about a game called, it's not a fighting game, but it is a Capcom game, Lost Planet 3. The developer of Lost Planet 3 made a big vertical slice, like a big proof of concept game, and like at the last second, the publisher of the IP or whatever pulled out. And they're like, shit, like this is going really bad. Just so happened around that same time, a Capcom producer was going all around California saying, we need a pitch for a game. And when he came to the doors of this developer, they're like, this is what we have. It's for another game. But this is and it was so technically impressive. And that was a completely different project. He said, okay, you got the job. Now, unfortunately, it didn't work out for that developer long term. Not really Lost Planet's fault. I think
all those poor third-party Capcom devs at that time.
Yeah, all of them. just set them all up, all to get knocked down. I think Yaiba, Ninja Gaiden Z put them out of business more than Lost Planet 3 did. But it's a similar thing where if that Capcom producer hadn't been going around California that time, they had spent all this money on a proof of concept for a game, and then that fell through. They would have like probably gone out of business way, way, way sooner than that. So
yeah.
It happened, and this is back in like 2010, and it's happening today. But now it's like going to indie developers almost a little bit, or at least
more
like
so, to be honest.
More so, yeah. You're probably right.
It's like it's the unfortunate. Like we're talking about theoreticals that would be great if this could happen and stuff like that. But we see some situations, like obviously with like what's happening with Sega right now, where that is really cool. That'd be awesome if that could happen and give opportunities to other like indie devs with other franchises from Capcom or whatever, SNK or Konami. But the same situation might be present, because it's just unfortunate. It sucks that you put so much work into something and eventually it just goes nowhere.
Yeah,
I mean, I just also want to point out that did happen to Skullgirls. Konami pulled out of Skullgirls.
Oh yeah.
And like that's one of the reasons why the crowd support for Skullgirls is so large. That's actually before my time, to be honest with you. And like that's crazy to me to think that literally they had money ready and everything, and then just their publisher got in trouble, and that killed the entire project of a already ready, finished game, ready to promote, done, paid for, and no more checks coming through.
Yeah.
You're done. Like that can happen with anything and everything. And when it happens to an independently made game that's not under a larger studio, that's death for the game, usually.
So we got to talk about Skullgirls, right? We're getting
let's get to it.
I realize how deep into this we are. Let's give some shout outs, Matt. Do we have anything that we want to like specifically quickly go over between this list? Because there's so many games in here.
Too many.
There's two specifically, since you already talked about Fire Force Fighters. We've talked about Blazing Strike already in a previous episode.
Yeah.
We're looking forward to that. The one I want to give a shout out to, but we should also mention Pocket Bravery, which a lot of people have been talking to me about, which is an SD, like super deformed, like very like Gem Fighters mini mech style game with some really cool POC centric characters. And it has like a really good, like meaty punch to there's a demo for it on Steam currently right now. And it's a bunch of like really cool looking characters, like really nice sprite work. And the other one I wanted to mention was, Varvarion, which is probably the most Japanese, like, trying to be like a cool barbarian style word. But this is from a one-man development team called Polygonomicon.
I like it.
I think like Max or maybe Justin, we all saw this game at one point like years ago. And it's there, like a few articles got written about it. It's just a 3D fantasy arena game where you're like your orcs
It looks
and
like Dynasty Warriors.
it looks like it looks like quite a bit better, a bit more stylized. Like in its combos, they look a little bit more fancy, but it has a whole versus component to it. So this is made by one person, I think. Don't quote me on this, but I think they're like a former Arxis.
This is ex-Arxis, it looks like it.
It looks like it, right? And it's been taking so long. Like I first heard about this in 2018, 2019, but it just got like an update just like a month or two ago, saying like it's hopefully going to be coming soon, maybe later this year, maybe next year. But Varvarion, if people look this up or look at the
looks nuts.
hopefully the trailer that's playing above our heads right now, it looks super, super sick. And I hope it's something that they're still making it, obviously, but like, I really want to play this because this is totally in my wheelhouse. I feel like outside of Dynasty Warriors games and maybe the occasional thing, like either everything is Dynasty Warriors or Dark Souls, and I kind of want like an in between. And this is kind of scratching that itch for me. But those are the two I wanted to give shout outs to.
The last one I will give a shout out to, because I have like a small amount of just understanding the history of it, is definitely Rivals of Aether. Because Dan was on the KI development team on the Microsoft end, and he was one of the dudes that helped figure out like the combo system and the breaker system and how it all complements each other. Super nice dude. And I remember him telling me about his project, his essential platform fighter project called like Rivals, and now it essentially has become this huge spin-off thing. It has become a full game that has been released and realized and has its own fandom, and it has toys, and it's getting like a sequel now, from what I understand, with the big 3D models and stuff.
That looks too good. I thought that was an April Fool's joke. I thought they had spent like $1 million making an April Fool's joke. I'm like, no, this is it. It's a 3D Rivals of Aether. It looks so sick.
Yeah.
I think it's still a ways off though, the sequel.
So either way, like,
I love this game.
Just big shout outs to Dan and his crew. They've essentially started in fighting game development and then branched off and did their own thing. And that's just awesome to see success stories in any way.
Yeah. And Shovel Knight's in Rivals of Aether as well.
There you go. Yeah,
that's
there
cool.
you go.
Yeah.
As well
Indie
as
man.
Ori.
Ori's in that. I forgot about that.
That's because Dan used to work at Microsoft and had some friends that that makes a lot of sense. I wish a KI character got stuck in there. That'd have been badass.
Saber
They also
Wolf.
put Greninja in there. They put the girl that I played was the crystal chick with like the whatever she is, but she's basically a grappler. This podcast isn't going to go to any of my audience.
Wait,
right?
you're saying you I thought you don't like grapplers. You play grapplers?
It's okay. Nobody's going to listen to me, right? Like this audience isn't real, right? Like it's not going to be.
This is a grappler friendly zone. We like every archetype is allowed in here. So
I did not know. I did not know that's what I signed up for. But
was not aware. I thought Justin was on the staff, so I just assumed I was going to be safe. Didn't know. That's okay.
That's okay. That's fine. Any other shout outs before we get to like we kind of discussed? Because there's a thing I specifically want to know about Skullgirls that I read and I wasn't sure about. So I was like, I'm sure this is true, but I want to get. But anything else anyone wants to mention before we get to it?
To Gang Beast and you, Matt, for introducing me to that game. I never laughed so damn hard playing a multiplayer game, and it's like I don't know, it's like 8 players or something. I love Gang Beast. I
don't care how long it takes. If Gang Beast can get to a main stage at Evo, that would be something.
Just the camera swooping around and the penguin is holding on, man.
it already made it to like a PAX Prime, so I feel like eventually it has to go to Evo, right?
Right.
There's
like
a PlayStation Gang Beast like that we played, I swear to God, 2 years ago. That's super sick, and I can't remember the name of it. It's like not Gang Beasts, but
there's a lot of those games.
Beast Gang.
Beast Gang. Chat, you guys will know exactly what I'm talking about. But it was super fun. It was like a beta. It was an online beta, and then it just vanished, and it's eventually going to show up. So anyway.
Yeah, I forget its name. Yeah.
But Skullgirls, let's talk about Skullgirls. right? Obviously, it is an official main game at Evo this year.
For the first time ever.
Yeah, for the first time ever. Because I remember before when they had like that mystery hidden game, you have to like kind of like donate to like your charity or like or crowdfund, right? And Skullgirls was really, really close. It was second place, right? It was like really close. They almost raised up to like $100,000
off.
Yeah, it was like almost $100,000.
What beat it that year? Was that the Melee?
It was Marvel.
Yeah,
Melee.
that was Melee.
I thought it was Marvel 2 for a second. Yeah, it was Smash.
It was the year that Melee
Marvel 2
made
got
it.
in. Marvel 2 was
did.
in.
Okay,
Marvel
that's
2
true.
they had 2 Marvel games that year. They had Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 and Marvel 2.
Man,
I have studied that Evo ad hoc.
that was tough. It was really tough just because the Skullgirls community really came up that year, and they really wanted that game as an official title. But it came down to like, I feel like every year, like every time the game reveal is about to come out for Evo, it's like so many people's like, come on, Skullgirls, and it just never happened until now.
Yeah, but maybe now was the right time. You know what I mean? Like it just wasn't destined for until this year, because like just the community and just everything is like at a fever pitch now. So maybe it would have been, maybe a little earlier would have been worse. I don't know. It just seems. Sorry?
I agree, Matt. To be candid with you, I agree, Matt, because like I kind of briefly talked about before the podcast started, Skullgirls Mobile has been a very huge driving force in revitalizing our community.
Yeah.
To be very candid with you, our community was not in the most positive place 2 years ago. And that was unfortunately largely in part due to some negative things that happened with the previous development team, but we've since moved on, created a brand new development team of Future Club Dev in coordination with Hidden Variable, who are now working on Skullgirls Second Encore and Skullgirls Mobile. And the positives behind that is by working with those 2 teams, specifically Hidden Variable, which is responsible for developing Skullgirls Mobile, there's an entirely brand new age group and demographic of people that are now having an opportunity to enjoy and experience Skullgirls on not just the mobile platform, but also on several different consoles.
So,
which I think is something you couldn't ask for before.
I was going to ask you because I've played very few fighting games like on mobile in any fashion, and the one I did was Injustice, just because I had like a tie-in with the game to get like a costume, and it was essentially like tap on like a 4-button thing. How does Skullgirls tackle like combat in an online environment? Does it take away directional inputs?
It's very similar, actually. We still do have directional inputs in some regard, like you press down double thumbs in order to block. You can actually grab, unfortunately, inside of this game by holding down 2 thumbs and swiping down. But it is very similar to Injustice, where you do have certain moves like that you press down on, but you have to unlock and level up those moves.
Yeah.
And they're different for every single fighter.
Yeah.
So it is very similar. I like to call it the most popular fighting game on mobile because it is very, very true. Like if you look at and watch the game, it looks completely the same as if you were playing Second Encore. I've streamed myself playing Skullgirls Mobile, and people can barely even tell the difference unless they are very, very active inside of the fighting game scene.
Sure.
They typically don't even know it's a mobile game. And I think that type of accessibility, while like moving on the combo system of basically normal, special, super, or every single time and moving alongside the Marvel ABC launcher, ABC ground, ABC super, is very useful to help people get into the fighting game from the mobile fan base. And in that regard, I feel Skullgirls does a good job.
In the same way that, I mean, that mentions the same issue I've had with like simple control schemes of like, we're just going to make our fighting games easier and easier and easier, where it's like the barrier is so low now that there a decent skill ceiling. In the same way that it's like, yeah, people should be able to do moves easily, but there should be a graduation, right? If you want to go like to the way you can really control your character and do way more stuff, here's the unlocked mode where now you get access to all this stuff. And I feel like the mobile version should be the complement to that, where this is just like, this is the version where we can play it seriously to a certain degree, but if you want to get to the nitty gritty and how like all these characters really play and what they can really do, go check out the console version or the PC version.
Yeah, the Skullgirls Mobile does a really great job with just kind of implementing an easy combo system. The fact that like you can kind of do like auto combos, but the auto combos actually look really cool because it goes from ground to the air, and then from there, that's like the end of your auto combo, and then now it's your choice to kind of like continue with a super or continue with a special move to do like a ground bounce and a wall bounce, and that's a kind of what's the graduation phase for the Skullgirls mobile, where like you can kind of really extend your combos in a very easy form, and it just makes it super easy to understand as well too.
In a mobile fighting game, you should press buttons and get cool shit. That's what you should be able to do.
Yes, no, if you're doing it 100%. I just also wanted to add that Skullgirls Mobile is actually the only mobile fighting game to also include versus, literally against two people anywhere in the world, that runs off of GGPO.
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's
I thought you were going to say, like, in general, it's the other one with versus. I was like, really?
No,
I'm out of the loop.
I would never. Do you know how many jobs I would lose if I made a statement like that?
Right.
It is currently the only mobile fighting game. Delete everything else.
And Warner Brothers is just like, cancel her contract. Cancel it right now. Right now.
Because I think the only other, I guess, mobile fighting game that I played that had like kind of like a 1v1 netcode, but the netcode was kind of sus, because Skullgirls, I haven't had an issue with Skullgirls Mobile, was the Power Rangers Battle for the Grid for mobile. They had, but it's technically a card system, so it's not really kind of.
Wait a minute, you mean Legacy Wars?
Yeah, Legacy Wars. Sorry, Legacy Wars. Yeah, Legacy Wars, where it's like kind of like a card system, and like you can't do specific attacks because there's like too many cooldowns, so it becomes more difficult to play compared to Skullgirls Mobile, where it's definitely more kind of like combo heavy, and they want you to just do stuff as soon as possible.
Sure.
Yeah. I want to.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I just want to say I want to talk about like a little specific thing about Skullgirls. So it's like, you know, I played it a bunch like around launch and even like a year or two after, and I'd occasionally dip in when a new character got released. But there's this amazing thing that happens whenever we're on the cusp of a new Skullgirls character being announced, and the community is as such, or the lore is as such, where a character has just been whispered on the wind, like a name or something, or like a silhouette, and that's all you'll get for years. And they do such a great job of building that character's mystique up, as when they're actually announced, like the world goes insane. Can we think of any characters like that, Sharpie, in the last couple of months?
As someone that has previously worked with Future Club Dev and Hidden Variable, I am not allowed to discuss any future characters or possible characters that I would like inside of the game.
We can't talk about Goku. I was just kidding.
It's a thing where it's like my name holds a lot of weight inside the community. I'm very aware of that, and my biggest fear is that one day I'm going to announce, God, I would love to have this character in the game, which I did do previous to being aligned with Future Club and Hidden Variable, and unfortunately it resulted in kind of a rift in the side of the community, so I could badger the developers. So I've stepped away from doing that.
You know if people are actually involved when they don't talk about it at all. Like, you know, that's great. That's a great thought. I'll talk to you guys about something else.
And what I can say.
Well, I'm going to stop you right there. Like, you're totally responsible for, that's the exact right response. I'm talking about things that have already been released. So when Black Dahlia was announced, that's like, even having not played the game in like a good long while, I was like, I know of Black Dahlia. I've heard the name Black Dahlia. Everyone's excited. Now I'm excited for Black Dahlia. So spearheaded by you, but also other people on my timelines, everyone going nuts about Black Dahlia. Like, there's more hype for Black Dahlia than like, Oro. You know, Max might go crazy, but you know, Oro. But the community does such a good job at hyping up these characters, even if they've only mentioned once or twice. You've never even seen what they look like in some cases, or depending if they're like a Kickstarter character, like back in the day when, you know, they'd reveal like bits about making a character. But like when Black Dahlia was announced, it seemed like fighting games were just focused on that for like a good day or two. Like everyone was talking about. A lot of it is.
The reality is, to be very candid with you, and I've said this publicly before, which is why I feel comfortable sharing it. I was not in a positive place with Skullgirls at that point in time in my life. I had a very negative experience that the community also experienced. I was literally right there when that negative experience happened, and I felt an obligation to continue with the game and the community because of what I represented inside of the community and what it would look like if I were to disappear from
For
the
sure.
community at that point in time. Multiple characters came out after that point in time. Annie was a big one. Umbrella came out after. I did not feel any kinship towards those characters specifically.
Yeah.
The big character I play in the game is Eliza, and I play solo Eliza. She encompasses everything I want from a fighting game character, but she had since been changed because there was a new developer on the team, and they changed her to be more true to who she was supposed to be when she came out. I didn't like the changes. A lot of the community did, so I don't try to publicize the fact that they're not my favorite changes in the world because it's just me, and I'd rather do right by the community than just myself. But when Black Dahlia came out and I saw her kit, I was literally brought to tears.
Yes.
Like actual, it wasn't cute. It wasn't like, how like people will stream and cry and be really adorable and like, you love them so much. I was ugly crying.
Yeah.
And like my poor editors, I was like, please edit this out.
Because whenever Max gets the character he always wants in Smash and it happens, he has the cute thing going on where he's all hyped and stuff.
The most adorable
He's like,
cry.
I told you so.
My fiance watches his videos all the time, and I'm like, how can Max cry and everyone be happy? And when I cry, it's just, God, get that woman from in front of the camera, please. And that's fair.
And you mentioned something that I think is also pretty critical because once again, you were like representing this game, what a lot of community looked for and stuff like that. I have the exact same like situation with a lot of fighting games because I obviously had my super biases and super preferences and things that are not that suck, right? Because everyone sort of just goes through that phase in their life at some point. But as soon as so many people were coming to my end and my information, or if not my resource to find out what's going on with fighting games, I started to realize that, you know what? I don't think I really care if you like the one that I specifically like, just as long as you try them, right? Yeah. So it became more of like, I'd rather be the person that somebody shows up for fighting games and got into it. And even though it wasn't the thing that was super for me, I'll be vocal like, you know what, this game isn't the thing that I'm exactly into, but there's nothing wrong with it. Like, even though I'm kind of vocal about what I don't like about MK11, is it a bad fighting game? No. Like, look how great this is. Look how many things you can do. Look how many characters. It's the best looking thing in the world. I've gotten past the like, I'm just going to talk shit about stuff that I don't like, but I'm definitely going to have like an element of excitement about things that I really do enjoy and explain why I enjoy those and not why those are better, right? Not why what I think this is better. No. You got to eliminate that completely when you're the representative of communities.
And I want to thank you for that, Max, because when I actually announced Skullgirls, I watched a lot of reaction videos to the announcement. Your reaction was actually very, very, very sweet. You obviously were not super excited about Skullgirls personally getting in there. There was another game I believe you wanted in there. Sure. But you still said, you know what? Good for them. Good for
Absolutely.
Sharpie. Congratulations to Skullgirls. And a lot of people didn't take that approach. A lot of people, took that opportunity to be like, well, I'm never playing Skullgirls.
I don't like this and it sucks. Kind of.
Exactly. And it was such a hard moment for me because there wasn't anyone in the game at the time that I really felt a kinship to. So when the Black Dahlia announcement happened after EVO was announced as a main game, it was a turning point for me because it meant two things. It meant, one, I could go back to creating content about characters that I really enjoyed inside of Skullgirls instead of just making content for the community. And two, I could continue my relationship with the game outside of having a very public relationship as the face of the game.
For sure.
And that was incredibly important to me.
Yeah.
So that's why Black Dahlia was such a big deal on my timeline and why she will remain a queen on my timeline.
And it feels good. It feels good if things are happening with this character or if developments are going on that people want to know what you think about that because you clearly have a very deep passion for it and are able to communicate why you have that passion for it, why it makes you excited. What you're describing is literally my entire video making career, Yep.
You guys heard it. Maximilian called me Maximilian 2.0. You guys heard that, right? There you go. So yeah, Skullgirls is obviously a main game at EVO this year. You can check it out. Streaming will be occurring on twitch.tv/EVO. You can check out the schedule, but we will be commentating the game, myself and a few other commentators, all day on Friday. You can check us out at any point in time. And as always, play Skullgirls. Thank you so much for having me on here.
I think we're actually at the part where this is the first technically like first party EVO main stage indie title. Right? I'm trying to think if any of them ever made it, and it was always either a big Capcom thing or a Bamco thing or an Arxis thing. Like this is a big change for EVO.
Yeah, this is the first one if you don't count EVO Online last year. But from an offline perspective, this is the first one.
Yeah.
And also, Sharpie, where can people at home find you on the socials or on the internets?
Fantastic question, Max. As a matter of fact, everyone can check me out specifically on TikTok, tiktok.com/@DaPurpleSharpie. That's DaPurpleSharpie. You can go to watch.sharpiepls.com to check out my latest stream. You can find me on Twitch, you can find me on Twitter, and you can always find me on YouTube, where I post only the most polished shit posts.
That mostly involve talking shit about grapplers.
Well, Sharpie did say she likes. Sharpie did say she liked grapplers earlier, so she likes grapplers.
That's true.
That's not on the record, right?
All right, thanks to everyone for tuning in to TripleKO.
We are waiting for the Dark Souls of fighting games. Let us have it. We're ready.
Soul Edge has nothing on a lightsaber. Like, I'm sorry.
James Earl Jones comes back.
No.
Oh no. Oh.
I don't think kids trade games anymore. I need that sense of accomplishment, and it wasn't there. And I think that was a major flaw.
The way they engineer these is just phenomenal.
As much as you're into like the comics, I was very into the toys, so I was on like the message board all the time.